Greetings, good people. This is Simon Stengel, aka the Mad Priest of Friedel, coming to you from the Chapel of Perseverance in Friedel. Today is our final short sermon entitled, Why Did Christ Have to Die on the Cross? Chapter 12, and it's the final chapter in the booklet entitled Foundations of Christianity. And you might ask me, why would you bring such a cardinal point at the end of the book rather than the beginning? Because to understand it, you need to gain spiritual wisdom. You need to spend some time trying to figure out God's nature and what is all this about. Why exactly did we inherit this fall, the fall of man? You should read Genesis chapter 1 to 3 to understand what God had provisioned for Adam, how he forged a woman for him, how she screwed up and dragged him along like pretty much every single marriage today. I mean, if you ask me, one of the reasons I can't handle women is because when you tell them, don't look at my phone, it's private, they'll say, no, I'm going to have a look at it. But when you go to sleep, she will look at your phone to make sure that she finds out anything she can control. It isn't anything that will help her. She will just simply become emotional, freak out, imagine the worst. This is exactly what women do, and this is exactly what happened in the Garden of Eden thousands of years ago. God said, guys, leave the tree alone. I'm not going to explain to you, just don't do it. Just like I used to tell my ex, leave my phone alone, leave my computer. But she couldn't handle that. She needed to go into my private stuff. She needed to understand, to control, to forge all these imaginary things in her mind that she could then wage a war against. God said, leave the tree alone. And what did Eve do? She went to the tree and couldn't possibly let it go. And Adam kept telling her, listen, Toots, please, you're going to screw up. We're having a good time here. Things are good, aren't they? Just leave it alone. What is this about? Why can't we just leave it? We don't know. I'm not sure what this tree is about. It's the tree of knowledge. We don't know why we should or shouldn't eat this fruit, but whatever you do, don't screw it up for me, please. She couldn't let it go, and eventually she went down. She was tempted, tasted of the fruit. Adam went down and said, what the hell have you done? Then, instead of saying, well, God will provide me someone else, let it go. He couldn't possibly be separated from her. So he went down in a blaze with her. Instead of going back to God and saying, God, I'm sorry, I did my best. I couldn't control her. She was a pain in the ass. There's nothing I could do. Just like I couldn't tell my ex or my girlfriends, leave my bloody cell phone alone. Why can't I look at the phone? Because it's private. Can't do it, you see. So this is just by way of explaining to you, and I'm not a misogynist. I'm a realist. I understand anthropologically that women are predisposed to digging away at any mysteries they cannot control. Not necessarily because they're interested cognitively. They're interested emotionally. And she screwed it up for Adam, and he went down. And what was that treachery? What was that betrayal? I asked myself, well, what was it? Big deal, you know? They had eaten the fruit because the devil told him, you will not surely die if you eat this fruit. You will become like God. You will have the knowledge of good and evil. You will have an understanding of what all this is about. So God is telling you not to eat this because he doesn't want you to become a competition. So what happened was they ate the fruit because they were told, and they began to imagine that maybe God had some ulterior motive and they wanted to find out if they could become just like him. It was treachery, plain and simple. And God banished them, and much later in Genesis 22, God set up this contract with Abraham, and he said, Abraham, take Isaac to the mountain and sacrifice him. Because Abraham flipped and he said, what the hell? But because he was obedient, unlike Eve, he said, okay, let's do this. That's what he's saying. I'm trusting him. And this was possibly Abraham's ultimate test of faith. Took his son, his beloved son. Imagine, this is after he had all the screw-ups with Ishmael, with Sarah, all the hassles he had. He's got this son that he had just been given, and he had to sacrifice one of the things that he treasured most. And as he was about to sacrifice his son, God said, don't. I was testing you to see if you were going to obey what I asked you to do. It was a test. But because you were prepared to sacrifice your son, I will sacrifice my son, so as to atone for the screw-up of mankind. Thanks to Eve. And I'm not a misogynist, by the way. So, why did Christ have to die? Because Adam screwed up, thanks to Eve. Abraham came along and made this pact with God, and God said, okay, this is how we're going to do it. I'll sacrifice my son. And what is the sacrificing, really? Well, he had to atone because man had screwed up. And Jewish people in those days, if they sinned, they had to take an animal and sacrificed an animal to an altar so as to atone for what they had done. So it was the fulfillment of a Judaic law that if you sinned, you had to sacrifice an animal, a heifer or a goat or whatever. For what man had done, which was almost unpardonable, God had to sacrifice a perfect heifer, a perfect lamb, a sacrificial act of perfection in order to completely cleanse the screw-ups that happened in Eden and had amassed over the hundreds and hundreds of years thereafter. So, Judaic law, sacrificing animals to the altar, this was a common practice for maybe thousands of years thereafter. God said, I'm going to have to sacrifice my son. And not only, when he died, he went down to the depths of hell and set the captives free and said, now, because I have taken this screw up on my shoulders and paid for it, because he was sacrificed blamelessly. He atoned for our sins. Why? Because the only way that could be done perfectly was for him to be a perfect sacrifice. When he went down to hell and kicked the devil's head in, he said, you guys screwed up because you took me to hell. You killed me. I was sacrificed on this cross, but I didn't have to do this. I was completely blameless, but I took on this mess up in order for men to be able to enter into a relationship with God once again. It's difficult to understand until you meditate and think about it. A perfect screw-up could only be redeemed by a perfect sacrifice. And that's why Christ died on the cross.